Okay, so Yachimo, greetings, everyone. Yeda say we thank you once again for joining in with us. This is an important topic. It was brought up in a previous live, as a matter of fact, last night. And we had planned to go into some more detail about it. So I want to get some specific information dealing with hoodoo, ancestry, DNA, genealogy, ritual. People always have the question, how do you find out, first and foremost, about your Afuraikani, meaning African ancestry, specifically what clan you come from and so forth, what ethnic group, what clan you come from. Of course, we show that hoodoo is Akan Ancestral Religion in North America, so that is the Akan religion. So if you are ethnically Akan, if you're descendant from Akan Ancestresses and Ancestors, spirit genetically, and were forced into North America, that you're part of that hoodoo blood circle, that hoodoo blood circulage, so-called lineage. But people want to know how to determine that. And in addition to that, in relation to that, even if you're not part of the hoodoo tradition, maybe your people were Yoruba, forced over here, you still have a ritual means to find out your Yoruba ancestry through the ritual practices, as well as, confirmed through DNA and genealogy and so forth. So we can find out who we are spirit genetically. When we say spirit genetically, that means, of course, physiologically through blood, through DNA, but also when you have two parents and they come together to bring a child into the world, when the mother and father come together and there's a conception, then an ancestor or ancestors from either the mother's side or the father's side is drawn into the womb. So if it's a mother's great, 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 great grandmother who comes into the womb, that is, from her blood circle. If it's one of the great, 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 great grandfathers of the father and so forth, that ancestral spirit is drawn into the womb. They may have, quote unquote, mixed blood from the mother and the father. But as we say in AMARUKAFO Nation in North America, what we say is you can mix blood. Well, tumi fra moja, nanso wo tumi fra okra. You can mix blood, but you cannot mix the soul. So the soul reincarnates along with the spirit body and so forth. That can be mixed. So you're either coming from one side or the other. So when we talk about spirit genetic inheritance, it's talking about DNA blood, of course. That's your physical body. But what spirit came from what side of the family? What ancient ancestor or ancestress were you when you came into the world? You were watching over your descendants on earth as an ancestor or ancestress in what we call Asamindo, the ancestral realm. And at some point, one of your great, 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 great grandchildren got married, came together with their spouse, and drew you back into the womb. So you are the same ancestor or ancestors from the same ethnic group that you were hundreds of years ago. You reincarnated through a womb, and you have the same identity. Your skin may be a little bit lighter brown because of the violence that took place during enslavement over the past few hundred years, but you're the same spirit operant from the same clan within this new physical body. So you have the same identity you had when you incarnated in the previous lifetime, when you were living on the continent, speaking your language, living amongst the people, practicing your ancestral religion. You're the same individual, just like every night when you take your clothes off and, wash them and so forth. And then the next day you put on a new wardrobe and so forth. What happens is you're the same individual, but you're changing your attire. We're the same ancestor, ancestress, but we're incarnating into a new body. So we talk about transcarnational inheritance, the reincarnation of an ancestor and ancestress through specific blood circles and so forth. Now, so we're going to start from the ritual context and go back to the quote unquote scientific context. First, we're going to go to show a little clip of our hoodoo film. So on our page, on this YouTube page, you have, you'll see that we have both of our, documentary films. Hold on a second. We have both of our documentary films. The first documentary film we put out back in 13,019, so-called 2018. And then 2 years ago in October, we released Hoodoo, Akan Ancestral Religion in North America. And we showed the identity of Akan Ancestral Religion as the foundational culture, the source culture of the Hoodoo tradition and so forth. And that is part of a 3-part film series or trilogy. The first film was released 2 years ago in October. We are working on the second installment of that trilogy, the Hoodoo trilogy. The first one talked about identity and cosmology. The second one is going to deal with ritual. So this is our Hoodoo film trilogy crowdfunding effort, and we've talked about this in previous broadcasts. We're raising funds so we can complete the filming, and we're probably a third of the way there with regard to finishing the film, but we want to finish it by October 18th. This is the film you can contribute. And Yedase, we thank you to those who contributed so far. We have our Hoodoo Mind, Hoodoo Nation Festival in October, mid-October. It's going to be October 18th this year. This is our 11th annual Hoodoo Mind, meaning Hoodoo Nation Festival. And at the Hoodoo Mind Festival, we want to screen or pre-screen the film for those who, contributed to assist us in completing the film. Whether you attend the festival in person or if you attend, online and so forth, we have a private link so you can watch the new film. That is going to be October 18th, but we have to finish the film prior to that. So we're raising funds to finish the film. So if you can contribute to that, please do so today. As a matter of fact, I'll put the link in the chat room right now. So as we're going through this information, you can go to the site. Okay, so that is the link right there. Also on this site, though, we have the original film. And this is what I want to show you because we're going to get into this whole notion of ritual. Okay, so that's on YouTube, of course. On our YouTube page, you can watch the entirety of the first Hoodoo film for free. It's 102 minutes. And you can watch our original, the first film we put out about ancestral divination in North America. But this is from the first film. I want to show you a little ritual piece that we did, and it's directly related to identity. So just so you're, familiar, in the first part of the film, we talk about hoodoo, but we have to start talking about truth. So one of our books, I've published 31 books. One of them is this book, Rekit Henasperet, the etymology and cosmology of the words religion and spirit. So we show that the words religion and spirit have their etymological origins in Rek, in ancient Kemet, as well as Seperet in ancient Kemet. It doesn't come from the Proto-Indo-European language phylum. Then we go into, so we give proper definitions of what originally the term religion at their root and spirit at their root means. Then on one of our other books that I published, Kuku Tuntum, the Ancestral Jurisdiction, we show that the fictional characters who never existed of any form or of any race are totally fraudulent and have nothing to do with real religion. So Jesus, Yeshua, Allah, Yahweh, Buddha, Brahman, and so forth. All fictional cartoon characters never existed of any form or of any race whatsoever. So we show that, and then we, for example, Muhammad, the spirit of the Northern Nile, corrupted into Muhammad, deity Ptah, corrupted into Buddha, Khemsu and Merit, corrupted into Jesus or Jesus and Mary, Yahweh, the moon divinity, corrupted into Yahweh, and so forth. So we get the fake religions out the way, and then we focus on the Hoodoo tradition. And we start off showing our travel to Khanit and Kemet, ancient Nubian Egypt, going to the source, because we'll find that our people were in these areas, then we migrated to Western, Central, and South Africa a few thousand years ago, carried the same culture, language, and so forth. And then when some of us were taken from those regions and forced into North America, we carried that culture into North America. And these are the same religious practices. The Hoodoo tradition, Juju tradition, Voodoo tradition, Wanga tradition, and Ngangan tradition, all of them come from Western, Central Africa, and originally coming from, the ancient source going back over 100,000 years. So we show that, and we document these things. But hold on 1 second. Now, this is the part we want to get to. Now, this is an Akuaba doll that we acquired. It was found in Virginia in the 1700s. We acquired it via an auction and so forth. It's an ancient Akan voodoo doll. Well, not voodoo doll, but hoodoo doll baby, Akuaba doll and so forth. And we have that at our shrine and so forth. But this is what I want to show you right after this. At the first Hoodoo Nation Festival 11 years ago, somebody took a short video on the phone of the Oshwe, the libation that we did. So I want to show you that ritual process right quick. It's just a very short clip in this film. And then share why we're doing that. Okay, so the reason I showed that is because that was the first Hoodoo Mind Festival. We started off explaining what Oshwe libation is, and then we pour libation to invoke the Yabosom, the forces in nature, the deities, evoke the Nananum Nsamafo, spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. You saw the little miniature Nkomre, the miniature shrine that we had set up, and we had the Akuaba that you just saw. We had her right there on the shrine. The ancestress who carved that doll, of course, is evoked as well. The spirit of that ancestress who 300 years ago had carved that doll, enslaved in North America. She's still connected to that, that ancestral work and so forth, as well as our Nsama for our ancestresses and ancestors, and Yaboson we evoke and invoke. But we had the shrine set up. Now, we're talking about on the ritual side, how to learn about your ancestry, whether you're Akan or Yoruba, Basa, Fula, Fang, whatever you are, learning about your ancestry. First and foremost, you learn directly from your great-great-great-great-grandmothers and grandfathers. Of course, they know exactly who you are. If you went to, your grandmother and grandfather today, if they were at the delivery room when, your mother gave birth to you, and they can tell you exactly what happened, and they know who you are, and they know who your parents are, of course, that's obvious. Your great-great-great-great-grandparents, going back 5 generations, 10 generations, 20 generations, and so forth, they know exactly who you are, when you came into the world, when you lived with them as part of their community, back on the continent of Africa, living in a certain clan and community and speaking language and so forth. And they watched you from the ancestral realm, be drawn back into the world physically through our great-great-great-great-grandchildren and so forth, and you're born into the world as an infant. You're an ancient ancestor or ancestress born back into the world as an infant and operating through this infant body and growing and developing and so forth. The first thing you find out is that you can learn directly from your ancestresses and ancestors exactly who you are, what clan you're from, and then they will direct you to information physically and tangibly to prove physically what they've given to you spiritually. So you take it from what we say, Osoro to Asase, from heaven to earth, or Pet to Tal, like you would say in ancient Kemet, the heaven to earth and so forth. So that ritual process, someone asked a question in the other live, and they were asking me about specifically Akan Ancestry. It's my Akan Ancestresses and Ancestors who informed me that, number one, that I'm Akan, which I didn't know anything about the Akan people at that time. I'd heard about the Yoruba people or the people from the Congo, but I didn't know anything about the Akan people. They directed me to study and learn about Akan people and learn about Akan language and so forth. They also informed me, and this is back in the 90s, that the Akan people come from ancient Khanit, Nubia, and ancient Kemet, and directed me to study the language of the Akan people and then study the language of ancient Khanit and Kemet and verify that. So what do you do when you get a message from your Nsamanfo, your ancestresses and ancestors, that one, the people of the Akan people of Ghana and Ivory Coast come from ancient Khanit and Kemet, Nubia and Egypt, and then they direct you to study it to verify. So I get the spiritual message, that's one thing, but then I go and do exactly what's told so I can begin to, verify. So let me show you one of the first things that we got, because this is back in the 90s. So no, I've never heard of anybody talking about Akan people coming from ancient Khanit, Kemet, Nubia, and Egypt. We were thinking that the people in the western part of the continent have been there for thousands of years. We have ancient ancestry going back 20, 30, 40,000 years in ancient Khanit and Kemet, but we weren't connected like that. That's what our understanding was. So start studying the Akan language. Then start studying the reading and writing of the Medut Toro, the hieroglyphs of ancient Kemet. And after doing that for a number of years, well, first, as soon as I started studying, I started realizing that, of course, it's accurate. It proved exactly what they said. Over time, I ended up publishing a document, and we're working on this to expand this, but you'll get the gist of it right here. This is a short introductory document to an upcoming comparative dictionary, and I'll call this document Akan Vocalizations of Our Ancestral Language of Kemet. And we give some examples. We talk about it as a work in progress. We talk about the different deities that we've published on, and we'll show you that, showing that the same gods and goddesses that are worshipped in ancient Khanit and Kemet are worshipped by the Akan people in Ghana today with the same names and descriptive titles. The different parts of the spirit body is laid out in ancient Khanit and Kemet is found in the Akan tradition as well. But then we said below is a sample of a few words demonstrating that we have continued to utilize the same terms with the same meanings from ancient Khanit and Kemet to Akan culture today. So one thing to note, that in the older dictionaries, when they didn't know what the vowel placement should be, they would arbitrarily insert an E in between two consonants to facilitate pronunciation. So for example, this word is actually the bowl with the lip here is the K sound, ka, and the horizontal boat is the S. So it's really spelled K-S, K-S. The people in ancient Kemet, of course, knew the pronunciation, so they didn't always include the vowels in the Medut and Toro. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't, but they didn't have to because they knew KS, KS. They knew how to pronounce it. in the older dictionaries, they would stick an E in between consonants if they didn't know what the vowel placement was. And then once they would figure out what it is, they would add the proper vowel later. So that's important to note. But in the language of Kemet, kes, to chatter foolishly, to jest. In the Coptic dialect, which is the late period dialect of Kemet that came at the end of the dynastic period about 2,000 years ago, right before the Greeks invaded and so forth. It's a different dialectical variant, but it's KAC, as you can see here, KEC, kaskes, but to chatter foolishly, to jest. What do the Akan people say? In the Akan dictionary, kasa, to talk much, talk noisily, to chatter. And you can also say to dispute or contend in words, to wrangle, and so forth. But to chatter foolishly, to jest, to talk much, talk noisily, to chatter, kes in ancient Kemet, and it's actually pronounced kasa, and we still use that term in the Akan language. Note that this Akan dictionary was published, they started working on it in the quote-unquote 19th century, in the 1840s. So you had Swiss missionaries going into the forest belt in Ghana, sitting with the people in the forest and compiling a dictionary. Their goal was to compile the dictionary, get the entire language in the dictionary, and then translate the Bible into the indigenous language to brainwash the people. But first they had to put together the 600 plus page dictionary. So it was very simple. If a dog walks by, they say, we say dog, what do you say? They say kramai, and they write down kramai. If a bird flies by, you say that's a bird. What do you say? They say anoma. They write down anoma for bird, and they just went through everything, compiled a 600 plus page dictionary with thousands of words and so forth. And what's interesting is if you're sitting in the forest in the 1840s with elders and eldresses, and if they're in their 80s and 90s, that means they were born in the 1750s, 1760s, some born in the 1740s and so forth. That's around the time that some of our people were taken from those regions and forced into North America. So when we were taken from the region of Ghana, for example, in like 1730 and forced into North America, the way in which we spoke the language and the manner in which we practice Akan Ancestral Religion in its pristine state, that is the Akan expression of religion we brought to North America, which we use the Akan word Undu or Hoodoo to describe. Now, what has happened since we left, when Christianity came and Islam and they started corrupting certain things, those corruptions happened after we were already gone. So we took the original ancient pristine practice and brought that to North America 300 years ago, and we continued that. But when you have people sitting in the forest, they're not English speakers. They don't read and write English. They know their language. They've been living in that forest region for over 1,000 years in those specific areas. And a Swiss missionary is sitting there with the native people, and they're telling you, this is what our language is, and these are what these terms mean. And then you compare it to a hieroglyphic dictionary that was comprised, by people being connected in ancient Kemet and so forth. And the ancient terms thousands of years ago compared to what people sitting in the forest in the 1840s are saying are the exact same terms with the exact same meanings. And then when we get to the deities, they're the same goddesses and gods with the same names and attributes. So, but let's go further. So when the Odumafo tell you something, then it's true. Once again, hem, to roar, to bellow. Hemet, a cry, roar, bellow, battle cry. And when you see the triple crown, the triple atef crown, for example, on Heru Bedeti, when he's in the form of a lion and so forth, there's certain kings wearing the triple atef crown and so forth. It's also called the hem crown, or the war crown and so forth, the war battle cry crown and so forth in ancient Khanate Kemet. Now, hem in ancient Kemet, once again, it's really HM. They didn't know if it was home, home, or heen, heen, or ham, ham. They didn't know what the vowel placement was. So they just stuck an E in between. But we know what the vowel placement is because you look in the Akan language, hama, hama, boisterous. Example, epo ye hama, hama. The sea, epo, rages, as when or if agitated by a storm. Hama, hama, ye, raging. So you're talking about boisterous and raging. Hama, hama. In ancient Kemet, hem, hem, which is really pronounced hama, hama, to roar, to bellow, to cry, roar, bellow, battle cry. That's boisterous, that's loud, that's raging. That's, you know, exactly the same word, same definition. Kai, K-A-I. And there's another spelling with the bowl with the lip right here. And this bird, this eagle and so forth, that's K, and then the eagle is A. So you have K-A-I, Kai, Kai, and also K-A, Ka. And then this one is also the bowl with the lip is the K, the bird is the A, K-A or Ka. To think out, to devise, to meditate, to speak, to repeat, to say, to cry out, call out, tell out, to sing. What do you have in Akan language? Ka, to emit a sound, to utter, speak, say, tell. So as you can see, exact same word with the exact same meaning with the proper vocalization. When you look at Egyptologists and they've been trying to decipher the language of ancient Khanid Kemet, and they were trying to use, Hebrew or, Sanskrit or different Arabic terms because our language terms ended up in Arabic and so-called really Kanani, so-called Canaanite and so forth, which corrupted into this fictional cartoon character, Hebrew, quote unquote, language, which never existed. But they didn't want to look in the languages of Africa because then they would have to admit that the people of ancient Kemet were Black African people, and for over a century they've been trying to say, well, the Egyptians were actually white, or they're just, Arabs and so forth. In fact, those white Arabs are invaders. So, but when we look in our languages, we have the proper vocalizations. Sha or shai or shai, to fix, to appoint, to decide, to determine, to destine, to predestinate, to allot, to decree, to ordain, to commission, to authorize. That's important because in the Akan language, the HY combination is vocalized as shet, shet. It's kind of like he and Y together, shet, shet. And it sounds like shet. And this is why when you look in our Akan language dictionary, when they show the HY combination, it's translated in English as the SH sh combination. So that's shet, shet. And what does shet mean? To be put, set, or fixed, but then also to fix, to set up, institute, to set, constitute. Hold on one second. Okay. To fix, set up, institute, to set, constitute, to appoint, to predestine, predestinate, appoint, or ordain beforehand. So that is very specific. It's not a situation where you say, well, the word ma or mama means mother, and then another language it says ma or mama means mother, and you're like, oh, it's the same language, because that just comes from a baby opening its mouth and saying mama and looking at the individual who's feeding them, and that's where you get mama from and so forth. So that can come up in any language. So you can't use a simple term like that, or da da. That's one of the first terms that a child will make, the sounds they will make. So that's kind of universal. You can't say, well, mama is the same in this language and the other, so it must be the same language. But when you have a term like shet, meaning to predestinate, to appoint, to decree, to ordain, and that has to do with cosmologically, when a spirit is coming into the world, their divine function in creation that's assigned to them by Nyamewa and Nyame, the Great Mother and the Great Father, Supreme Being. They are given a divine function, Nkra and Nkrabia, and a set of spiritual potencies that we call She and Shebia to execute their divine function. A configuration of spiritual energy, that's what the Shebia is. It's appointed, fixed, preordained, predestinated, and so forth. So that's a very specific term with a very specific meaning cosmologically. There's a deity also called Shai, and the feminine is Shayet. And these are the deities of quote unquote destiny or fortune. It has to do with when destiny and fortune together is talking about what kind of fortune or resources do you have that you bring into the world with you to execute your divine function. What energy complex? Are you a child of a fire divinity? Then you have fiery energy. That's the fortune or the resource that you bring into the community. If you're a child of a water divinity, a river spirit, and so forth, then you bring that cool, watery, magnetic energy. That is your resource or your potency, and you bring that fortune into the community. So, Shai and Shayet is a male and female divinity. The noun version of the term, Shai and Shayet, to predestinate, to decree, to ordain. That's very specific to our divine cosmology. It means the same thing in ancient Khanate Kemet as a mundane term and in relation to our divine, quote unquote, destiny or divine function. Means the exact same thing in the Akan language. So we start getting much more specific. That's an undeniable direct link showing it's the same language because it's cosmological as well. Ari, the eye, also a look, glance, an in ancient Kemet, to turn a glance towards something. The eye or eyes, a look, ani or any. The rolling R and the N are interchangeable, so ari or ari. The tongue tapping the roof of the mouth once, ari, or arit. The eye, and it shows the symbol of an eye, and also a look. This is why it can also be spelled with the N symbol, an, which is also ani, to turn a glance towards something. And then, of course, in the Akan language, ani or eni, the eye, eyes, or look. Then you have ban, to be evil, to be wicked. Coptic, ban. Then you have an Akan, bani, bad, evil, wicked. Then they give a number of different examples. Once again, that's very specific. That's not something that someone could just make up or comes out of the mouth of a baby and so forth. Ban, in ancient Kemet, meaning bad, evil, or wicked, and bani. And it's also written bon without the E at the end in Akan as well in a different dialect. Bon or bani, bad, evil, or wicked, very specific. And then I'll just give you the last couple of them and then we'll be done with this. Ma, a conjunction also used to grant or to give. Ma, like we say, me ma wo achi or ma ache, I give you, ma ache, dawning or the light. That means good morning. Ma ache, to give dawning, to give you the light. Let me grant, permit, and so forth, grant ye to me and all of that, but ma meaning to grant or to give. Ma in Akan, to give, hand, communicate, bestow, confer, impart, grant, present, deliver, or yield up. Once again, very specific. And then we also have the term TWRA, is also spelled DWR, Jira, to be clean, to cleanse, to purify, but also to celebrate a ceremony of purification. So Jira, meaning purification, and also to celebrate a ceremony of purification. In Akan, what do we have? Jira, to dash, to cleanse from guilt, moral, and religious uncleanness, to sanctify, to consecrate. And then you have Ojira, the yam custom, an annual festival celebrated in the month of August or September. You have Chwa Jira, to celebrate the Yam Festival, Wochwa, Ojira, Wo Kumasi, Akwam, Akuropong. That is actually the New Year observance. Let me show you what that is. Apo and Obrajira. This is our page on our website. We say Ojira is celebrated for 7 days in some areas and 40 days in other areas. Ojira is a term meaning purification in the Akan language. At the end of one cycle year and the beginning of a new cycle year, it behooves us to purify ourselves physically and spiritually. It is a time to reestablish the values of our ancestral culture and rededicate ourselves individually and as an African community to our individual and collective Nkrabia, divine function and creation through Ojira. We enter the New Year cycle with a renewed spirit, a renewed drive to accomplish, and a renewed focus to eliminate all obstacles to our success, whether they be physical, including human, or non-physical. The majority of Akan people celebrate the New Year at some point within the Gregorian calendar months of August, September, or October. For certain groups of Akan Fo, the New Year celebration is called Ojira. We celebrate our New Year from September 16th through the 22nd, or September 17th through the 23rd. Whatever day is the autumn equinox, the fall equinox, the first day of fall, that is our New Year's Day. And then we count back. So this year, for example, September 22nd is the first day of fall. So from September 16th through the 22nd, that is our 7-day Ojira observance, or New Year observance. And on September 22nd, the first day of fall, we say Afe Shia Pa, which is basically saying Happy New Year. And for us, that will be the first day of our new year of 13,026, not 2026, because 2026 years ago, nothing happened, because Jesus is a fictional cartoon character who never existed. And we proved that in our book, Kukutuntum. So we're in the midst of an astronomical cycle, the 26,000 year precessional cycle, the position of the earth and the sun and so forth, relation to the stars. So we're in the middle of that cycle, hence the years beginning with 13,000. So our New Year's will begin on September 22nd. That will be the year 13,026. And then 100 years later, on January 1st, in the dead of winter and the dead of night, in the coldest, darkest, most dead time of the year, the Whites Narrow Spring will say Happy New Year and say 2026 and so forth. But prior to that, at the beginning of fall, that's the end of the warm cycle and the beginning of the cool cycle. It's the harvest time where you harvest, they said the yam harvest and so forth. It's a celebration. Harvest the fruits of your labor. But it's also the time to take the seeds and plant them. That's a conception. Conception is a beginning. Then the rooting and germinating and so forth. And then 6 months later, sprouting, which is the spring, is the second new renewal period. But for us, the conception point, that's the beginning of a new year. So, but what's important about that is Ojira means purification. There's a ritual process where we take plant specific leaf called the Ojira leaf, cleanse our head, ritual cleansing and so forth. So that's a ritual. Ojira means purification. It also means to celebrate a ceremony of purification. Now imagine, in our Akan tradition, it means that in ancient Kemet, and if you look once again, the hieroglyphs, to be clean, to cleanse, to purify, to celebrate a ceremony of purification. So we have, not only do we have that ceremony, we have the word Jira in Akan, which means purification, to purify, to cleanse, to purify. We also have the ceremony of purification. When it says that in the hieroglyphic dictionary, the Egyptologists can't tell you what the ceremony of purification is. We can tell you what that ceremony of Ojira is. It's a 7-day ceremony. It's the New Year observance that we've incorporated here in North America. For the past, this will be our actually 26th year doing that 7-day observance and so forth. But we have the term, but also the ritual impact. Okay. So we should go through that process just to show that when the Odumafo say, hey, the Akan people came from ancient Khanate, Nubia, and Kemet, and then migrated west, and they speak the same language, you need to go study the language to verify this. This is the 90s. So I heard what they said spiritually. Then I went and did the physical, tangible work to prove physically and tangibly what's given spiritually. So I have a full confirmation, and then I can share with other people. I'm not going to get online and tell you, hey, the spirits told me this, so you need to listen to me. No, they're going to give you information. They'll do the same thing with you that they've done with me, and they've already done it with you, probably through dreams in different ways, and you may not have realized what messages you have been given, but they have been communicating with you the whole time since you were a child up until this very moment, even to push you to listen to a broadcast like this. So now let me give you another example of that kind of process. And we should be able to, and we can prove anything that we say. It's the fake religions that have to make you depend on quote unquote faith because they know it was fraudulent from the beginning. So they tell you have to have faith, believe whatever has been told. And if you try to question it, you're questioning quote unquote God, and that's against the law and so forth, and you'll be punished. So they have to fearmonger you, lie to you, and then fearmonger you into believing into their fake traditions. So when we talk about Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and so forth, are totally fraudulent, pseudo-religious practices that have no value. And they took fragments of our culture from ancient Khanate and Kemet and manufactured these fake traditions to try to force back on us to enslave us mentally. We've broken free from all that and expose them for the frauds that they are. So, but when you have real religion, you can question it, examine it, prove it, do everything, because truth can always stand up to examination. If someone tells you 2 + 2 = 4, and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to go get 2 things and get 2 more things and count them to see if it adds up to 4, and they rush and try to stop you from doing that. Or if they say, well, no, actually 2 + 2 = 5, you're like, all right, well, let me test it. Let me go get 2 things and 2 more things and count them to see if it adds up to 5. If they get nervous and tell you, well, if you do that, you're going against God and you're going to burn in hell for eternity, you better not investigate that. Then there's a problem. That's the fake religion. In our culture, the Odumafo will direct you. Go ahead and prove it. Go get the 2 things, get the other 2 things and count them, verify for yourself, and then come back. So that's what we do. And then we're going to get into some of the DNA information as well. All right. Oh, and by the way, if you have any questions, you can post them in the chat room. It's question and answer throughout the, live stream. So you can post those questions, whether it's about hoodoo, genealogy, and so forth, ancestral religion, spirit communication, possession, whatever it is, divination, you can post it in the chat room. Okay, so this is one of the 31 books that 32 books that I've published. You can download the ebooks of the 32 books for free from our website. This is one of them, the Akradin Boson book. In the Akradin Boson book, we're talking about the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7-day week and the deities that govern them. This is volume 2. But there's a portion I just want to share with you. So here in this book, I'm showing that the Akan divinity, you see a ritual statuary on the left side, representative of Awusi, as he's called in Akan, Awusi as well as Asi. In ancient Kemet, he's called Awusi or Alsar, or Asari or Asiri and so forth. In Coptic, it's Usiri or Awusiri. It's Awusi in Akan. And then you have Ajua, who's also called Essi in the Akan language. You see her here holding the baby. And then you have Aset, who in the Coptic dialect is Essi. So that's Asar and Aset. The whites in our spring corrupt their names into Osiris and Isis, but this is Osar and Osed or Osadi or Osidi and Osed or Essi. That's Awusi and Essi and Akan. Same deities, same names, operating through the same forces in nature. So we have a book going into detail showing their cosmology and names in ancient Kemet, as well as in the Akan language to prove that these are the same divinities. Let me switch back right quick. That's important in the Hoodoo tradition. Because in Akan language and culture, you're born on a certain day of the week. Every day of the week is governed by one of the male or female divinities that govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies. So Sunday is the day of the sun, Monday is the day of the moon, Tuesday is the day of quote unquote Mars, but we have our own names for that. So Sunday is Awusida, Monday is Joda, Tuesday is Benadar, Abenada, and so forth. And the spirits that animate these solar, lunar, and planetary bodies, we're born on that day. We're named after those deities because we carry their energy into the world. So since I was born on Awusidar Sunday, I'm born under the governance of the deity Awusi, which is Asar, operating through the sun and so forth. So I'm Kwa Asi or Kwa Awusi or Kwa Asi, Kwa, a servant or a subject of Awusi or Asi. So that's Kwa Asi becomes Kwasi or Kwesi and so forth. That's my Kradin or soul name, but then I have other names as well. If a female was born on Friday under the goddess Afi, she's called Afia or Afua and so forth. So every day of the week, when you come into the world on the day of the week, that's an indication to the community that, oh, this child was assigned to this deity pre-incarnation, and the deity, the Aboso, made sure the child is born on their date to let the community know this is my child and they carry my energy into the community. So when you have names like Kwame, hold on. I'll give you the chart right quick. And then we'll go back to the book. But this is the page talking about the solar, lunar and planetary bodies. So we show the day of the week, the deity, the male and female names. So you're born on Kwesida, Awusida, or Sunday. The male divinity is Awusi. The female divinity is Essi. In Akan, that's Asar and Osed in ancient Kemet. A female born on Sunday is thus Akosua or Akosua or Essi. And a male is Kwesi, Kwasi, Akwesi, Sisi, a number of different titles. Joda is Monday, Ajua and Ajo, male and female divinity operating through the moon and so forth. If you're born on a Monday and you're a female child, you're Ajua, that's your soul name, after the female divinity Ajua, operating through the moon. If you're a male born Kwajo or Kojo or Jojo and so forth. And then you have Benna and Abena, the divinities for Tuesday, the planet Benna or Mars. Abena for a female, Kwa Benna for a male. And then we have their praise names or nicknames, like Kobina, Kobe, and so forth. You have different praise names or nicknames. So Awukuda Wednesday is Awuku and Akua are the deities that is set in Nebuchadnezzar in ancient Kemet. Akua or Akia or Akia for females, Kweku or Kwaku or Aku for males. Then you have Yao, Ya, and Abba for Thursday, Ya or Ayawa or Yawa, and also Abba or Baba and so forth for females, Yao or Kwao or Ko and so forth for males. Friday is Afi and Fi, the deities, Afua, Efua, Afia, Fi, and so forth. And then you have Kofi, Kwafi, number of different titles. And then Amenmin and Ameminiwa, the deities for Saturday, Meminida, Ama, Ameminiwa, Ama, Ami for a woman, a female born. And then Kwame. So if you heard somebody named Kwame, like Kwame Brown and so forth, Kwame, that means he was born on a Saturday. He's under the governance of the deity Amen, Man, and called Kwamena or Kwame and so forth. These are the names. Now, in the Hoodoo tradition, we preserve those names. Hold on a second. So this is, again, proof, once again, when they said that, okay, you're Akan. Akan people come from Kanit and Kemet and so forth. And when we look at the names of our people and the quote-unquote praise names or nicknames that we give to our people, we'll find that we're using the same names. So we say Hoodoo and Akradin are soul names. A Monday-born male is Kwajo or Kojo, but a praise name for a Kwajo or Kojo, named after the deity Jo or Ajo, is Jojo. As you can see, DWO, Jojo, pronounced Jojo. So we instinctively, a mother, if she's Akan, practicing the Hoodoo tradition, when she has a child born on a Monday, she's like, I need to call this child Jojo. That's because he's a child of the divinity Ajo, the deity governing the moon, the cool energy of the moon and so forth. So the child is called Jojo. If you have Essie, that sounds like an older woman's name, but we have a bunch of people named Essie because the female was born on Sunday, named after the divinity Essie or Aset, Essie, and so forth. Another one is Akoswia or Akasi or Akosi. Akasi becomes Cassie. We've been hearing that name a lot lately. If they instinctively say, I need to name this girl Cassie, that's Akasi or Akasi, Akosi. Akoswia is a variation of that. Then you find out when you look back, oh, I was actually born on a Sunday. Or a female will find out when she's older and learns about this. My name is Cassie. That's a praise name for a female born on a Sunday. I look at my birth date and day. Turns out I was born on a Sunday. So my mother gave me the correct name. Male born on a Tuesday, Kobena, Kwabena, Ben or Benny, also Kobe, somebody named Kobe. They look at the day of the week they were born. It turns out they were born on a Tuesday under the governance of the deity Benna, and they're called Kobena, Kobina, Kobe, and so forth. And Fifi, someone born on a Friday. Emma instead of Ama for Saturday. So we show a number of different quote-unquote nicknames or praise names in that section, showing that we were maintaining the Akan day naming system, soul name system, all of these hundreds of years in the Hoodoo tradition. So when they tell you your Akan and your name and your praise name or your nickname that you've had since you were a child is an Akan name, okay, if the spirit tells you that, then we're going to go back and prove it. So I'm going to look up in the Akan language of all the names of the male and female born on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, the whole week, what their soul names are, their Kradin are, what the nickname or praise name or Umrane are, and then see if I have one of those names. And it turns out I do. And everybody else who's drawn to Akan tradition, when they look at those names or titles and so forth, they'll find that their parents gave them the correct name. Now, here's the other piece, and then we'll finish up on this and then get into some of the DNA info. So we're given some more truthstry in the beginning. We were showing that just like south of Kemet is Nubia or Kanit, then west of Kemet, where Libya is, the Western Desert and so forth, that was ancient Khan. It's also called Khan or Kahan and so forth. So you have Nubians west of Kemet, Kahan or Khan people, and Nubians south of Kemet, Kanit. And then we show some of the archaeology associated with that. Now, this is, once again, it shows you when they tell you something and then you go do the research, it's proven. We already showed that in this series of books that the deities that govern the 7 days of the week, these deities right here, all exist in the Akan language by the same names and the same divine functions, the same deities operating through the same solar, lunar, or planetary bodies, and the same functions in creation. Now, when they said the Akan people come from ancient Khanate or Nubia, and they migrated west, some stayed south and some went up into Kemet to found Kemet, but they were south of Kemet and also west. That's what my people said. Never heard about that in, reading anything back then. So let me investigate to see if there's any people south of Kemet in the region of Nubit or Nubia who have the name Khan. Because if they're telling me the truth, it must be there. So we did the research, of course, and we found that to be accurate. So of course you can download this book for free and so forth. So if you look at the word Akan in the Akan dictionary, that's the name of the people and the country and so forth. And then Akani means an Akan individual. Akanfo means the group of people, fo, who are Akan. So instead of saying Akans, we say Akanfo, the Akan group of people, fo, or Akani, an Akan individual. What does the word Khan mean? Why do we call ourselves that? Kani, it means the first, foremost, former, place, rank, or time. First, before. So the first, foremost, the first people, a component of the first people in existence. Khan means first or foremost, from the former time, from the beginning, original. So one of the reasons we call ourselves Akan is because we're a component of the first people to exist in the world. Khan, first, foremost, from the past, and so forth. Khan also means to count, number, or reckon. We're the first to engage in calculation to measure plant life, animal life, mineral life, the movements of the stars and so forth, calculating the days with regard to, plant life and the development of plant life, counting, calculating, measuring, so we can utilize that capacity to count and calculate to replicate the patterns in nature to establish civilization. So we're the first to engage in calculations, mathematical sciences, and so forth. And then we can replicate these patterns and build, agricultural activities and build temples and everything else. So we're the first component part of the first people to exist. Khan, first, foremost, from the beginning, and also Khan, to count, calculate, or reckon. And then Khan, clear, bright, luminous, shining. That means a couple of things. The first, to become illuminated, to, the light of civilization and so forth, become intelligent by operating and counting, calculating. But the first to become possessed with the spirits, become illuminated, so to speak. And so then we receive wisdom directly from the deities and ancestral spirits through spirit possession. When one becomes possessed and their aura becomes illuminated and so forth. So illumination, the first to receive the light of civilization, but also the first to be possessed with the energy of the divinities and become luminate like that. So that's what defines us as Akan. That's why we call ourselves that. First, foremost, from the beginning, Khan, to count, calculate, or reckon. Khan, clear, bright, luminous. Now let's look in the language of ancient Kemet. Akan, first, foremost, former, place, rank, or time. The language of ancient Kemet, again, the E is arbitrary. It's really the K sound, the N sound, and the T sound. So they didn't know if it was an E or an A or an O, I, or U. So they just stuck an E arbitrarily. The new hieroglyphic dictionaries, they don't stick the E in there. They'll just put the consonants. They'll put the K sound, the N sound, and the T sound, and that's it. In the front, in the fore part, before, aforetime, formerly, previously, in advance, the beginning. The land south of Egypt. Kant, formerly, from the beginning. Then you have the Kantiu, dwellers in the south, the Nubians. The front land, the south. The front is the beginning and the back is the end and so forth in our cosmology. So the south land is the front land, the land of the beginning and the front. Kanutiu, the inland folk, peoples or tribes from the interior. Kanti, the Nubian frontier, a land in the Sudan. So Kan meaning first, foremost, from the beginning. Akan is the Akan land, Akan people, Akan folk. And then we have the word Kant, meaning former time, previous, from the beginning, and the Kantiyu, or the Kanti people, the Nubian people in the Sudan. So it's absolute proof of what they said at the shrine. I was able to prove it linguistically by comparing the languages. Exactly what they told me to do. Akani, Kanti, the Nubians, people south of Kemet. But then it even goes further. Kan also means to count, to number, or reckon. This term with the tethered rope right here, sometimes it's the ta sound, and sometimes it's the cha sound, and sometimes the ka sound. So you see in the Coptic dialect, this symbol right here is the ka sound. So this is not thenu or thanu, it's kanu. And what does kanu mean? To count, to reckon. So just like Kan means first, foremost, from the beginning, and that's the name of ancient Nubia, Kan also means to count, calculate, or reckon in the Akan language. Kanu also means to count or reckon in the language of ancient Kemet. So now we have two of the same definitions in both languages. And we show that this symbol, the ka sound, is, we can prove that the tethered rope is the ka sound. And we can prove that in many ways. That's also important because the tethered rope right here is also the beginning of the name, not Tehnu, but Kantnu, the Libyans. Libya is west of Kemet, the Western Nubians, just west of the Nile Valley. They're not called Tehnu, they're called Kannu, the Kan people of the West. Just like you have Kan people in the south in Nubia, you have Kan people in Libya, the Kannu, the West. And then you have clear, bright, luminous Kan, and the same name that defines the people who are Kannu in the West, the Libyans, the Kannu people. The archaeologists call them the C group Nubians and so forth. Well, that same spelling, Kan, means to sparkle, to scintillate, to glitter, to shine. Lightning, stone, crystals, sparkling, and all of that. So just like clear, bright, luminous, Kan, this is Kahan, shining, glittering, and so forth. So we just, and then we show them side by side. So you have to imagine here, if I'm sitting in front of a shrine in the early 90s and Myron Samafo say, hey, the Akan people come from ancient Nubia. Now, if they tell me that I'm Akan and then they show that the Hoodoo tradition is the Akan tradition, we prove that and so forth, they say, actually, the Akan people come from ancient Nubia, south of Kemet and also west of Kemet. And some of them established Kemet and some stayed south and some stayed west. And the ones who were west, they moved further west and reestablished the Akan Empire, the ancient empire of Kana or Ghana. They moved further south, reestablished themselves, and then some of them were taken from that area hundreds of years ago and forced into North America. And this is how we got from the Nile Valley, Happy Valley, to the western part of the continent, and then into North America. But the Akan people come from ancient Nubia. The ancient Nubians are the Akan people. Well, I've never heard that before, so how do I don't want to just go out and start saying, well, I'm Akan, and it turns out we're Nubians, so we created ancient civilization. That sounds like you're making something up to make yourself feel good. So if they say that and tell me to research it, and I'll do the research, and the word Kan meaning first and foremost from the beginning, Kan meaning to count, calculate, or reckon, Kan meaning, shining, bright, luminous, and Kan also meaning the name of the people and the land. And then you look at ancient Kemet, and Kan means first, foremost from the beginning. Kan means, to count, calculate, or reckon. Kan means luminous, shining, illuminate, and so forth. And Kan also is the name of the land south of Kemet and west of Kemet. Then we were able to prove through all of this research that that simple statement that they gave me was 100% accurate. So now, I'm looking at chat room right quick, and then we're gonna get into some of this DNA evidence. We posted this a while back, like on social media and everything. This is an Akan statue. when I first, did a DNA test. And then I saw one of these Akan statues and had a similar look and so forth, but I got in the DNA test and I posted those two together. And even when I went to Ghana, there's certain people you come in contact with that, you don't look like at all, but then you see some that have your same facial structure, head structure, morphological characteristics, and so forth. But so when I saw this particular one, I just put it up. But all right. Okay, so question in the chat room. I understand that the Gregorian calendar is incorrect, so does that mean my birthday and age are incorrect? 33 born in November on a Friday. What would my correct birthday be? So, of course, now the age, of course, is the same age. However, when it says November, those are months that are arbitrary. So, we did an entire course on, let me show you that right quick. On the original signs of the Zodiac and so forth. We did an entire class on this based on this article, but we did a entire course on this, a 6-week online course. And actually, it was 2 separate courses. One was 7 weeks and one was 6 to incorporate all of them. And this is part of our educational curriculum, and we're going to talk about that because you can get your bachelor's degree in philosophy and then utilize that to generate income for yourself immediately as an educational entrepreneur, edupreneur. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. This is one of the articles we published. Achinebois. Sacred animal totems, original signs, zodiac signs, and Kemet. So these are the actual deities from which they stole the zodiac signs, like the ram divinity, Banabjedet, becomes Aries, and the Ptah Men, sacred symbol is the bull, becomes Taurus, and Shu and Tefnut, the male and female divinities that are the twins. They corrupted that into 2 male twins. So we show all of the symbols, but then we also show the astronomical zodiac dates. So for example, the sun enters the constellation of Neat, so-called Sagittarius, December 18th. Enters, constellation Kunem, so-called Capricorn, December 19th. So some of the dates are like one month, quote unquote, astronomical month is 25 days. One is 37 and so forth. One is 7 days. There are 13 constellations that cross the ecliptic, not 12. So it's not simply 12 months of 30 days each. They got that from the civil calendar in ancient Kemet, which is 12 days of 30 days each, but there are 3 weeks of 10 days each in the civil calendar Kemet. Then they have a 5-day intercalary month, but that's the civil ritual calendar. But the astronomical calendar, the months, vary. So yes, the dates as far as, October, Octo means 8. Nov for November, Nov means 9. December, Deca means like Decan or Deca means 10. Yet Octo meaning 8, but that's the 10th month of the year. Nov and Nova, November meaning 9, but it's the 11th month of the year. Deca meaning 10, but yes, it's the 12th month because they were messing around with the months and so forth. So those dates are arbitrary, but you can look in the astronomical zodiac. We have all of the dates there when the sun actually moves into that constellation. So to give an example, if you look at so about 60+% of the dates in the tropical zodiac are inaccurate, for example. So for example, June 21st is when the sun enters the constellation of the deities Shu and Tefnut, the twins, so-called Gemini. If you look in the tropical zodiac, they will say Gemini begins like May 21st and lasts till June 21st. But actually, May 21st, we're still in the constellation of Ptah Men, the bull, Taurus. So if you were born on June 10th and so forth, the whites in your offspring would say that you're a Gemini. But actually, June 10th, you're still in the month of Ptamen or Taurus. So the majority of the dates, I think it's between 60 or 80, no, I think it's actually 80+% of the dates in the tropical zodiac are inaccurate. So people who are saying that they have these, you know, certain zodiac signs, the majority of them are inaccurate. So you can look in the traditional calendar, and it's also important to look, you find out what your clan is through ritual practice, and it can be verified physiologically through genealogy and DNA and so forth, and find out what the sacred calendar is. So for example, the Akan have a 7-day week, the Igbo have a 4-day market week, and they have names associated with those 4 days and so forth. The Yoruba have a 5-day inclusive week and so forth. So different groups, the Guan people have a 6-day sacred week. So based on who you are, they have a sacred calendar, but it's based on, you know, principles. It's based on nature. It's not based on something political like the Gregorian calendar and the Julian calendar, when certain emperors were fighting and adding extra days just so their month would be longer than the other month that was dedicated to the other emperor. You know, we don't follow that. So you can look at a traditional calendar like the Coptic calendar, calendar of ancient Kemet, or when you find out what your clan is, what their traditional year, you know, calendar looks like, and see what's actually correct. But of course, the number of years is correct, you know. In fact, so let's see, just so you can, you said born in November. So October 31st, the sun enters the constellation of Ma'at, and she has the scales of balance of Ma'at. That's where they stole Libra from. So starting October 31st, which for them is Halloween and so forth, all the way through November 22nd, it's in Ma'at. So between November, if you're born between November 1st and November 22nd, you're under the sign of Ma'a and Ma'at, male and female forces of divine law and balance. But starting on November 23rd through November 30th, which is just an 8-day period, the sun enters the constellation of Serket, the scorpion goddess. And that is Serket right here, the scorpion god. You see the water scorpion on her head. From November 23rd through November 30th, each one of these deities, we did an entire broadcast on each one of them to show who they are in ancient Khanate Kemet and their attributes and so forth. So if you're born between November 1st and November 22nd, you're born under the male divinity Ma'a and the female divinity Ma'at, male and female forces of divine law and balance. If you're born between November 23rd and November 29th, you were born under the constellation of Serket. If you were born on November 30th, then that's when the sun enters the constellation, the 13th sign of the zodiac. Because 2,000 years ago, because of the precessional cycle, only 12 constellations crossed the ecliptic. So there were 12 quote unquote months in that context. But because the earth has shifted, there are 13 constellations that cross the ecliptic now. And the 13th sign of the zodiac is, they call it Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer. That's actually Sekhmet, the female divinity Sekhmet. And she is the one who bears the serpent divinity on her head and so forth. So okay. Okay, so you said November, that's November 29th. So that's still under the scorpion divinity, Serket. So the whites and offsprings call it Scorpio and so forth. Yeah. All right. Okay, so let's switch over. Okay. So we took a couple of things. We did the first test we did was the African ancestry test. African ancestry are the ones who really started all this DNA testing. Black geneticist Dr. Rick Kittles out of Washington D.C. Howard University. They established their practice and so forth. And what they did. Hold on one second. I have to turn the light up real quick. It's starting to get dark. But what they did was they established that because Black people want to find out about, their ancestry, and then the human genome, mapping of the human genome gave people access to information they never had before genetically. So they established that and it became very popular. And then all of a sudden, white groups, corporations started getting into DNA testing and they started talking about other things like, oh, we can talk about, how this affects you with regard to your health or what things you're predisposed to and stuff like that. But our focus, originally the focus was Black people wanted to find out who they are connected to genetically. And it was a, sea change in the way we saw things because we had some physiological, proof. We always had the geneaology. Genealogists can, go through these records and pour through these records and so forth and get some detailed information. And those who are astute at that can really get some detailed information with records of, even, people who were brought on the ships and what year the ship came and the logs of the, corporations and how many people and what were their names when they were sold on a plantation and when they were sold. They can grab a lot of these records. But then there's some records that you don't, you won't be able to get, or certain things that are not captured. So when the DNA came, it, did two things. It proved, of course, that we are Afro-Akani people. And with theirs, they're talking about within the past 500 years. Because DNA switches, you move to different areas, you take in different food sources and animal life and so forth. It affects your DNA and so forth. So what was happening within the past 500 years? The way the genetic profile of people in Western, Central, and South Africa, there are certain markers that they have that, if you look at a mummy and so forth from 2,000 years ago, even though they're related, it'll be slightly different because things switched when we migrated from the east to the west. So we went from the desert regions to the forest belt and so forth. So the specific unique genetic markers that show up in Western, Central African people over the past 500 years, when we have those same genetic markers and so forth, is proof that we are a descendant from Black people of West and Central and South, and sometimes East and North Africa within the past 500 years. So it destroyed a lot of things. First, they would try to say, well, Black people, you'll never know who you are, so just say that you're American and all of that. The whites and offspring don't want us to link with who we actually are because we can connect and engage in, economic development, have access to land and so forth and resources. And they don't want us to, put our efforts into building Africa into a superpower that will rival China or India or the United States or different countries in Europe. They just want us to be disjointed and unloyal to them, our enemies. So They want us to just be a self-hating group of people who hate our skin, hate our, attributes, our features, and just want to get on our knees and pray to a fictional cartoon character, white entity that never existed, and always be mentally enslaved. They don't want us to have any pride or anything else, change our names, change our diets, get back involved in ancestral religion, because that leads to us arming ourselves and overthrowing them and exterminating them ultimately, and they don't want that to happen. So they always have to keep us from our identity. It also destroyed the idiocy of the brainwashed amongst our people who, over 100 years ago, with the help of the whites and offspring, started putting forth these false ideas that we're Hebrews, that we're Moors, that we're quote unquote Native Americans, that we're Cherokee and all this other nonsense, that we're Asiatic. Some fools talking about we're extraterrestrial, that we don't come from Africa. There were no ships. The whole story of enslavement was a lie, pure stupidity created by the whites and their offspring, and put forward by self-hating Black people, as well as those who are simply mentally ill and they can't really understand and examine data. But they're still enslaved mentally by the whites and offspring. They hate themselves, and they will look for any chance to not identify with who they are because of that ingrained self-hatred. So anytime you hear someone talking about, we're not from Africa, we came from here, we were here first, and we've always been here, and there were no ships, it's always 100% of the time self-hatred. No matter what they say, it's self-hatred. It's a deeply ingrained self-hatred. So, but the human genome destroyed them. So what they've been teaching for the past 100 years, the human genome and DNA research totally destroyed these silly narratives that we don't come from Africa. So then what the brainwashed Negroes start saying is you can't trust DNA tests. That's the white man's science. Pure stupidity. First and foremost, African Ancestry is a Black geneticist. But DNA doesn't lie. They don't have a problem with DNA when they're trying to determine paternity for a child. But all of a sudden, DNA it's not workable when it has to do with identity, because they don't want to identify with who they are, which is Afurakani people. They have such a self-hatred that they want to pretend like they're anything but that, even though deep down inside they know they are. But it just destroyed their whole little movement that's, been around for the past 100 years that wasn't really effective, but it's been around. So you see them fighting online about that now. But the human genome being mapped brought that confirmation full circle. I did the African Ancestry test. They have the Patriclan line and Matriclan lines and so forth. I also did the Ancestry.com DNA test. It's an admixture test and so forth. And they don't have as many samples as African Ancestry. So their percentages shift. The more samples they get, you'll see that, say, if you were 50% Bantu or Congo and so forth, 1 year, then the next year they update your results, and now you're only 40% Bantu and Congo, and 10% Nigeria and so forth. They're getting more information and they're including it, so they'll give you a general picture, but it's not super precise. But they will give you a general picture. They have major regions, but they're getting more specific, but it's not as specific as it could be. So, for example, when I took my first Ancestry DNA test, the plurality of the DNA, the largest percentage came, their category back then was Ghana/Ivory Coast. So it was 26% Ghana/Ivory Coast, and then you had small percentages for other groups. Now, that was over 6 years ago when I first took that one, and that's what it had. Now, of course, Ghana and Ivory Coast, the major group in Ghana and Ivory Coast is the Akan people. So I knew what they were saying, that the largest percentage of my DNA came from the Akan people of Ghana and Ivory Coast. Now they have become more precise, so they will actually list ethnic groups. Back 6 years ago, they would just put Ghana, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Cameroon. They would name the countries, but they didn't have the ethnic groups. Now they're including ethnic groups on Ancestry.com for the Ancestry DNA test. What you can do, however, is you can take your raw results, genetic results from Ancestry.com, and you can plug them into other sites that have that are more precise and have a niche market that are more specific and precise than Ancestry. One of them is Your DNA Portal, and then there's another one called True Ancestry, and they have a specific thing that they focused on. So when I put mine in, and by the way, the whites and their offspring have had our DNA since we were babies. When they took blood from us when we were babies and so forth, they've always had your DNA. So if you think you're hiding your DNA by not taking a DNA test because you think it's going to be used in the matrix against you, they've always had DNA. They've been collecting that for, for 70 years. They released this DNA research, over the past 20 years, but they've been doing that for decades. They don't always let you know what they're doing. Just like, when they came up with the CD and then the, streaming and so forth, they were doing that 20 years prior. And they would utilize that for the military purposes and so forth. And then 20 years later, they would introduce it to the larger population as though it's a brand new technology. But they've utilized it in various ways and saw how it can be utilized militarily at first. They do that for about a generation, and then they release the technology to the people 20 years later. So, for example, I remember Quincy Jones talking about they showed him the first CD, like for a CD player, like back in the 60s. He was like, wow, this is interesting. But they didn't release, CDs, putting music on CDs until the latter part of the 80s. So it was already in existence 20 years prior, but they were, utilizing that and studying every means by which it could be used militarily before they let the larger population have it. So that's always there. Same thing with cell phone technology and everything else. So I plug my DNA results into yourdnaportal.com. It's free. And this is what we get. They're more precise. They have ethnic groups and they have true history about the different groups and different things. It says this mathematical setting divides your genome into 4 fragments, with each fragment representing 25% of your genome. This setting is very useful in modern ethnicity estimates since the size of the generated fragments match perfectly the percentage of DNA inherited from a grandparent, meaning you have, 2 parents, 4 grandparents. And so they can look at that totally admixture test and see what you're looking at. So this was interesting to me because Ancestry DNA said 26% of the genome came from Ghana and Ivory Coast. And then the other, is a breakdown with a number of different percentages, smaller percentages from different groups. And of course, our people, we are mixed genetically with other groups from the continent because of what happened on the boats. But you'll also see that when people in Nigeria and Ghana and other people take tests and they assume that they're 100% Yoruba or 100% Igbo, and then they find out, well, actually, you're 70% Igbo, and then you're like 10% Fang from Gabon, and you didn't realize that 200 years ago there was a war between your group and the Fulani people, and they brought some people over. There was some mixture, and you have some Gabon blood and so forth, or Fang blood. So, that's what's happening. This one shows that not just saying Ghana and Ivory Coast, but 25% from the Akan people of Ghana, 25% from the Bambara people of Mali, 25% from the Manyika of Mozambique, which is East Africa, East Africa, and 25% from South Europe. Now, first I just assumed, well, they polluted the blood circle during enslavement, so one of those people got through, corrupted the blood circle, and some of that did happen. Somebody during enslavement that did happen, but then they give you some details. It seems that a Nilo-Saharan group may have migrated around 2000 BC to 1500 BC from East Africa across the Sahel into West Africa, admixing with the Niger-Congo-Berom people. Remember, my Nsamamfo told me that the Akan people migrated from East Africa in Sudan and Kanit, migrated to West Afuraka and reestablished the Akan Empire, the ancient empire of Ghana. And then some of our people moved south from that region into the forest belt where the Akan people are now. Years later, the mapping of the human genome confirmed what the archaeologists were saying all along. So, and what my people said as well. The Nilo-Saharans, that's talking about the, from southern Kemet up the Nile and so forth. So, and that's the same time frame that we're talking about. Around 4000 BC, there appears to have been a movement of people from west or west central Africa across the Strait of Gibraltar into Iberia, leading to admixture in Spain and Portugal. So that means two things. Well, let me keep going. A Moor of the Cordoba Caliphate has been identified in around 900 CE, 1000 CE to be carrying the E1B1A1 and H1 plus 16189 haplogroups. That's talking about a Y chromosomal haplogroup. Also a Morisco carrying the L2E1 haplogroup around 1500 CE, 1600 CE. Both of these were of West African and Iberian descent. Approximately 19,000 years ago, East Africans crossed the Sahara to the west or West Africa. So what are they alluding to there? We know about the Black people in North Africa, North Africa. Remember we talked about Libya, the Khan land, Western Nubians, and then moving into Algeria and Morocco and so forth, the northern part of the continent. We've been over there over 10,000 years. Then the whites and offspring invaded North Africa. Some of these white individuals calling themselves Berbers are part of that invasion. They're frauds. They're not the real Berbers. The blacks are. But then some of us got brainwashed with Islam. The whites and offspring started calling us Moors. We wrote a whole book called Moor Means Dead. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, proving that the term Moor means dead physically, socially, and spiritually. And that's why they associated that with black and used it as a derogatory term, but it's a term from ancient Khanate and Kemet, which is a derogatory term. So we are not Moors, that's an idiotic title. But the whites and offspring started utilizing that title to call us that. So thousands of years ago, and Sheikh Anta Diop talks about this, we migrated from northern Africa into, right across the Strait of Gibraltar, into, in fact, let's show that. This is, this is Kemet, Egypt, Libya, Algeria, and then right here is the Strait of Gibraltar, and this is Spain and Portugal and so forth. So we crossed this little strait, went right up into the southern part of the continent, the Iberian Peninsula, and some of our people did that tens of thousands of years ago. Some of our people did it again a few thousand years ago, as it says here, and then some of us did it again thousands of years later during the quote-unquote Moorish invasion of Spain, and we established, black people now called Moors and corrupted with Islam and so forth. They're the ones who brought civilization to the Europeans, and Europeans learned about math and science and medicine and botany and everything else from the Moors when we were there, in Spain for 700 plus years. But they're using the term Moor just meaning black people. It's not talking about these clowns who call themselves Moors now in North America and pretending that's their identity. Pure stupidity, pure idiocy. That's one of the reasons we wrote the book Moor Means Dead. But they were just saying that the black people who were originally ancient Nubians, Khanitu, and some Kamal Egyptians who were living in northern Kemet, west of the Nile Valley, some migrated up into southern Europe. And then thousands of years later, when some were corrupted into Islam, some migrated up into southern Europe again. And they got the DNA of some of those black people. And when they say you have southern Europe ancestry, and it said 25%. Some of that, they literally took the DNA from one of those. And they talked about the Moor and the Morisco, those two different individuals, and they have the DNA from that the corpse of that individual. They have it in a database. Then they can compare your DNA and see, does your DNA match that deceased individual, that corpse's DNA? It's like, oh, you're related to him. So a lot of Black people are related to those people. But then also some of that in Europe is coming from pseudo so-called slave master raping the blood into our people and polluting the bloodstream and so forth. And then some of that European DNA from England or Scotland or something like that will show up, but that's not what defines us. As we talk about transcarnational transmission of culture. If you were an ancestor or ancestress living in Ghana, the region of Ghana, Akan Empire 400 years ago, and some of your people were taken and forced into North America, and you watched them once you transitioned as an ancestor, and your people were living in North America, enslaved and having children and grandchildren, you're the great ancestor watching that happen and trying to guide them to escape. Then eventually, 400 years later, you see that your great-great-great-great-granddaughter is ready to have a child because she got married, and they copulate and they generate that energy and they draw you into the womb for the first time in 400 years. And now instead of being born in your village, you're born into North America. The last time you were on Earth 400 years ago, you were living in an Akan empire. Now you're sucked into the womb of your descendant and you're born as an infant. Your skin is lighter brown because of the pollution that happened during enslavement and so forth. But you're the exact same Akan ancestor. So your blood is mixed, but your soul, your kra, can't be mixed. You're the same Akan ancestor who lived as an Akan person on the continent 400 plus years ago. You're the exact same Akan person now. So you're connected to Akan culture, Akan language, Akan ancestral religion, and so forth. So when you see other Afura Akani Afrakani cultures like the Yoruba, Afang, and others, you'll appreciate it because it's our people totally as Black people. But when you run into an Akan person, you'll have an extra, draw to them. When you come in contact with Akan language, you're going to be drawn to that. When you come in contact with Akan, aesthetics, you're going to be drawn to that because you used to make that kind of art. You used to wear that kind of art. You used to speak this language. You used to invoke the divinities in this language. And you'll know this is who I am because you were there before and it's in your ancestral memory. So the blood may be mixed, but the soul is not. So even with this mixture, there'll be some mixture, but one of those is going to be the one that you're actually incarnate from. Some of the others is, your people married someone else from the continent and so forth. That happened here, but that happens on the continent as well when they voluntarily marry someone from a different ethnic group on the continent. But here we were forced to do so, but still, we know who we are. So what was interesting is, I was told by my Odumafo that on the Matcher clan side of the family, a specific line of descent is where we incarnated through, and that's where the Akan comes from. And then when I see one of the specific grandparents basically has that 25% Akan ancestry, that is exactly what they told me back in the 90s. Identify which grandparent it was and said, you incarnated through this individual. That's how you came back into the world. And now, 20 plus years later, nearly 30 years later, I get this, and it's exactly what they said 30 years prior. This one specific grandparent is this one, that you're the ancestor of this one. Because you have, 3 other grandparents, but you're the ancestor of this particular grandparent. And this grandparent, had one of your parents, got married and had one of your parents. And then, you came through that parent. But this particular grandparent is the Akan one. I came through that one, so I have Akan identity. The other grandparents, they have some mixture from a different ethnic group and they get married. But if it's an Akan, if you look at this one, for example, if the Akan person here married the Bambara person, So one Akan grandparent married the Bambara grandparent, and they get married, and they're about to have a child. When the woman conceives, the spirit that enters the womb is either going to be an ancestor or ancestress from the Akan grandparents, so it's going to be an Akan ancestor or ancestress that's pulled into the womb, or it's going to be an ancestor or ancestress from the Bambara people of Mali, and that Bambara spirit will be brought into the womb. If it's the Bambara spirit, that child's going to have a Bambara mother, for example, and an Akan father. He'll be related by blood to the Akan people, but he incarnated through the Bambara people. He's a Bambara spirit, and he reincarnated through his Bambara mother. So he has a blood relation to the Bambara people, but he's a spirit that reincarnated through and returned as a Bambara. He'll have a Pan-African respect for the Akan father and his clan, just as, genetically connected family members, but his culture is going to be Bambara because that's who he is. And when we do divination, we find out what side of the family the child incarnated from, so we know what culture they practice. So, all right. And one other DNA piece. And this is just two of them, but you can, there are many of them that exist. Many organizations who engage in this. So there's a site called True Ancestry. They have a unique approach. They specifically have a lane. It's very nuanced because they just want to give a certain kind of information. So what they've done with, DNA matches and so forth, they've looked at the DNA. So, for example, when archaeologists find the bodies of people, like some kings in Europe or something from the medieval times, or somebody in Botswana, a king, or a queen in ancient Canadian Kemet, or somebody in West Africa, or they have somebody who died in a furnace explosion in Maryland in the 17 or early 1800s, and they have the DNA of these people specifically in a database and so forth, and people, scientists have access to that, then they will match your DNA up to see if you're directly related to these people. Now, if you think about it, you have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 great-great, 32, 64, 128, 256, then 512, 1024, 2098, or 2048, 4096. You keep going back just a few more generations. When you get to like 30 generations, you're like at 2 billion people, 2 billion great-great-great-grandparents. So there, people are related. You can have somebody hundreds of generations back, and there are millions of people related to them. So they'll look at, for example, the DNA of Ramesu III. They have his haplogroup. People can access that online and so forth. They'll see if you're directly related. And then I'm directly related. And there are millions of people who are directly related to Ramesu III and so forth. So when they say a royal haplogroup, a match, subclade, distance 2, and so forth, ancient Kemet ancestral seat, the Valley of the Kings. So they've done, they take different, there's another one in Botswana that was a match as well. And then the enslaved laborer in Katuk 10, ironworking furnace in Antebellum, Maryland. So somebody was working in a furnace in Maryland there was an explosion, the person died, and so forth. They have the DNA of that individual, and they can look and see, are you directly related to this person who died in Maryland? Is your DNA a direct, and mine is. So there's an ancestor in Maryland who died I'm directly related to. Now that's interesting because on Ancestry.com, you can build a tree, family tree. Up until that point, entire life, we were under the assumption that on the father's side, everybody was from Alabama, even during enslavement. And we have the slave rolls that you can look up on Ancestry that were written in the 1800s, and you can see the name of your great-grandparents written. They were working on this farm in like 1820. This is the name of your great-grandparent. This is the name of your great-grandmother, father, and so forth. And many of our people still live in that region of Alabama. So we were under the assumption that on the father's side, everybody came from Alabama. And on the mother's side, everybody came from Mississippi. And they did since the early 18, quote unquote, hundreds. But it turns out, when we looked at the census records that are up on Ancestry.com, and I can see, for example, my great-grandmother who was born in 1899, they took a census of her when she was like 18 years old, living in Mississippi. And it says, this is her name. This is how many people live in the household. This is the little baby who's 2 years old, and this is her name. And that little baby that the census worker is staying inside that apartment, taking the name of my great-grandmother. She was 18 at the time. She had a 2-year-old baby and so forth, which was my grandmother, who actually lived to be like 94 or whatever. My grandmother was 2 years old at the time. The census worker is taking down her name and saying, oh, she's 2. And this is your grandmother who was 18 at the time. So, but then they ask you, okay, well, where are your parents from? And then they list the parents of my great-grandmother. And then it says like Florida and the Carolinas. So we never knew that. We assumed that all of our ancestry was from Mississippi. And it turns out that when we looked at the true story, that before Mississippi and Alabama were developed as, plantation regions and so forth, the people were in like Maryland, Virginia, as well as South Carolina, Florida, and so forth. And then people brought their enslaved people to Mississippi and Alabama in the early 1800s to start developing those plantations. The plantations have been developed since the early 1700s in places like Richmond, Virginia, different parts of Maryland, and what is now South and North Carolina and Georgia and Florida and so forth. But Alabama and Mississippi came on like 100 years later. So it turns out I had people from the Gullah Geechee corridor who were brought in the early 1800s on my father's side and my mother's side to Alabama and Mississippi and so forth. So I never knew that I had that. But when I looked on Ancestry.com, saw the census record, my great-grandmother was like, yeah, we have people from, my parents come from, the coast. So, and the same thing with the father's side. We thought everybody was from Alabama. It turns out, there were people from Virginia and Maryland. I'm from Chicago. I moved to DC a number of years ago. Been back and forth between DC and Maryland because of work and everything else. And it turns out that I literally have ancestry in Maryland, and this deceased individual is one of them. So different ways that things are confirmed. So, and then when it comes to genealogy, that's something that Black people have been doing for over 100 years, and there are African American genealogical societies, and then you can even pay people to do the genealogy and do the research, the heavy research for you. You can do that. So the intersection between the DNA studies, genealogical studies, and DNA also includes some archaeological studies right in North America when they dig up certain things, like when we were able to get that Akuaba doll that's 300 plus years old. But DNA studies, genealogical research. But when the Odumafo tell you exactly who you are, they told me I'm Akan. They told me the Akan people are the ones who practice hoodoo, and then I did the research and found out hoodoo is an Akan word and so forth, and in hoodoo we have the same deities and same ritual practices, and the term mojo, like my mojo bag, comes from Moja and Akan, and the jack ball comes from Ja and Akan, and all the terms in the hoodoo tradition that have to do with the ritual and so forth, all of them are Akan words. Nobody knew that before we started publishing on it. I got the information from my Odumafo, but then I verified it. They told us that ancient people, Akan people, came from south and west of ancient Khanid and Kemet. The DNA proves that, the archaeology proves that, and so forth. So in multiple ways, they were able to prove spiritually, tangibly, physically what they share with you spiritually. And every Black person can do that, and it's our responsibility to do that. Okay. So I want to take some questions before we end it. We're almost at 2 hours. All right. Is it true? Hold on. Certain people's spiritual disposition gives away which deity they are governed by? Definitely. However, is it possible this isn't always the case? A Tuesday born isn't always warrior-like? Yes, because that depends on, of course, your spiritual disposition is basically your spiritual DNA. And similar to your physical DNA, you're going to show certain characteristics, and people can see who you're descended from. The same thing spiritually is going to show up unless you're born into a community or culture or family that's heavily brainwashed by white culture. Then they try to force you to operate in a certain way, and if you operate outside of that, they try to suppress it. And some of us, that happen with us, if have a young child that's fiery and outspoken and so forth, that will cause fear in the parents, because often people like that would get lynched or hung. So they try to make you docile and tell you something wrong with speaking out or being fiery or standing up to the whites and their offspring. So they end up suppressing that warrior type energy. Very often it comes out in different ways. But yes, your spiritual disposition, when people are acting normally, without trying to think about it, it's going to show up in certain ways. Sometimes the way they talk, walk, dress, whatever it is, the kind of artistic expressions they have, or the endeavors they move into. Like some people naturally, children of warrior, iron divinities, they're going to be drawn to metallurgy and things like that. They want to study that in college. They're drawn to the things that are directly connected. But sometimes we get brainwashed and get suppressed, and then we start operating in a different way. Okay, so Sunday, and also, by the way, if you're born, the day begins at sunrise, not midnight. So if you're born after sunrise on a Sunday, then you're born on a Sunday. For me, for example, I was born at 12:57 a.m. It was almost 1 a.m. The whites and their offspring would say that that's Sunday, that's Monday morning. So if my mother went into labor Sunday night, and then once midnight happened, she still hadn't given birth. And then at 12:57 a.m., it was almost 1 o'clock, 1 a.m. Monday morning, she finally gave birth and so forth. The whites and their offspring would say he was born on a Monday morning at 12:57 a.m. But the sun didn't rise until like 5:57 a.m. that year. So since the sun didn't rise until like 5:57, that's when Monday began at sunrise. It was still dark. It was still, the middle of the night when I was born. So 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., that's still Sunday night in our culture. It's not Monday morning. Monday morning doesn't start until the sun rises. So prior to the sun rising, it's still Sunday night. If I went along with the white calendar, which some Ghanaians got corrupted into embracing the white calendar, so they'll be born at 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 a.m., and they'll say, oh, I'm a Monday born. And they'll call themselves Kwajo or Kojo. And every time they say Kojo or Kwajo, they're invoking the divinity of the moon, yet they're actually a child of the divinity of the sun. So they're creating discordance within their own spirit body, because they're trying to invoke a lunar, cool, energetic divinity, and they're a child of a fiery divinity. And it creates discordance within their spirit because they're following the white star offspring. We do the same thing over here. Even if we learn about Akan day names, soul names, we'll be like, oh, I was born at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm a Monday born. If I was calling myself a Kojo or Kwajo, I would have been trying to invoke that cool, watery energy that has nothing to do with my spiritual disposition. So the day begins at sunrise. So if you were born actually on the Sunday, that is SC or Aset. So Akosua or Akosuya is one of the major names. In the Fanti dialect, they'll say SC. So you'll see that on the page. But that's specifically for those who are actually Akan. That doesn't apply to people who are ethnically Yoruba or ethnically Lobi or ethnically Lotsi and so forth. Every group has their own approach to identifying who governs the head and so forth. So this only applies to people who are actually ethnically, spirigenetically Akan. All right. Okay, another question. Does that mean even though all of us are blacks, are one race, we still have genetic differences tying us to specific or certain ethnic groups and tribes? Yes. And your spiritual disposition is rooted in that reality. And you have a natural inclination towards certain sets of activities and so forth, and a certain expression of how. So, for example, a Yoruba person and an Akan person, you know, they're living in different areas. The sun is called Oriya in Akan. It's called Orun in Yoruba. It's the same orb, but when it shines on us, we have a different genetic makeup, so it affects us slightly differently. Just like someone living in the forest and someone living in the desert, they have different dietary requirements because their bodies adapted to the region that they're living in. So certain things that someone who lives in the desert would eat on a regular basis is different than someone who's been living in the forest, his people, for the past 1,000 years. They have different dietary requirements. Same thing with our spiritual anatomy. There are differences, and that's accounted for in our culture. The manner in which, for example, we get possessed by the divinity that governs war and iron, which is Bena in Akan, Ogun in Yoruba, and Heru Bedeti in Ejikemet. The way he shows up and possesses someone in the Akan tradition, the way we interact with that force in nature is based on our spiritual makeup, and is slightly different than when he possesses people in the Yoruba tradition, and they call him Ogun, we call him Bena and so forth. But we also have the title Ogufo, which is related. But the manner in which we incorporate that energy is slightly different, just like it's different with regard to Yoruba people. It's similar, but it's slightly different. We have genetic differences and we have spiritual differences that need to be accounted for. Just like dietarily, if you have 2 children and you want to give them some, food that has, protein in it, and you give one of them butternut squash and the other one gets allergic and they have to go to the hospital and so forth. They come from the same womb, but there are dietary differences, and one is allergic and one isn't. You have to honor that reality that they are slightly different than the other child. They have to get protein, but they have to get it in a different way. Same thing with different ethnic groups. The way we align with the same forces in nature are slightly different based on what has happened with these groups over the past thousands of years. We've moved to different regions of the Earth Mother. We've taken in different kinds of plant life and animal life and mineral life in different ways. Our bodies are slightly different, although very similar, and slightly different spiritually, so we have to account for that. That's why we have culture. That's why we have different languages. That's why we have different expressions. And yes, a sibling. So with regard to us, you always have to find out who's who. Normally, we wouldn't have to do that. If we were living in an Akan region for the past 1,000 years, most of the people who incarnate into the family is an Akan ancestor or ancestress who lived here, lived on Earth 400 or 500 or 600 years ago, and they have returned. And they all live in the same area, same, nation, village, and they keep returning. We come over here, we get all mixed up and so forth. So when we marry somebody may be Akan, somebody may be Yoruba, you know, you get married, you bring one of the Akan ancestors back or ancestresses the first time, but then when you have another child, you may bring an Igbo one back. That's why we in North America, we need to do divination to find out who's who. All of the children are not always going to be all the same ethnic group. You may have one that's from the father's side and one from the mother's side. That happens very often. And then when you find out, well, my daughter is actually from my side and she's Igbo. Our son is from the father's side and he's Akan. So we're going to give the son an Akan name. We're going to give the daughter an Igbo name. And then it'll be an expression based on the, you know, the Igbo tradition in North America and the Akan tradition, which is Hoodoo in North America. We have certain, you know, unique things that are unique to us in North America. So, and the way we practice Hoodoo or the Igbo tradition in North America. So, yes, we have to pay attention to that because of our unique circumstances. They do it a little bit on the continent as well because sometimes they marry people from other ethnic groups. And an ancestral spirit may come forward and say, you know, this person is actually one of those Fang people from Gabon. When your grandparent married one of them, this is a different kind of ancestor you just brought back as opposed to your regular ethnic group. So, okay. May I say we appreciate that. Said I'm Ghanaian, I am learning new things from you. Yeah, when we put out information about our Akan tradition, and it's because they did the same thing on the continent to our people that they did to us here. In the educational system, they tried to make you suppress traditional religion and say it's evil. They tried to force Christianity on you or Islam and so forth. And then people have to start relearning, make an effort to relearn, you know, about, oh, what are the Akan soul names or quote unquote day names and what do they represent? I see more and more Ghanaians starting to put out videos saying, oh, we have a 7-day week. And the reason our names are Kwame and Kojo and Akosua and, you know, Akua or Akuya and Afu or Efuya and so forth is because, you know, we're named after the spirits that govern the solar, lunar, and planetary orbs. Some of them have used information directly from our website that's been out since, you know, nearly 20 years, and they're including that in their presentation. So, okay, so you said you're born at 8:35 on Sunday, so that is Sunday is after sunrise. I don't know if I'm Akan, but my ancestors are Gullah and Geechee coming out of Virginia, migrated to Alabama. So the Gullah Geechee, you know, piece. And in fact, I'm going to pull up a book on that. The Gullah people are the Gola people from Sierra Leone, and the Geechee are the Kisi. So when they try to say it's the Ogeechee River and it's Native American, it's pure stupidity. The Gola and Kisi people came to be from Sierra Leone, came to be pronounced the Gola and Kichi and Geechee people and so forth. So, and so the whole Gullah Geechee corridor, like from, you know, North Carolina, South Carolina, you know, Georgia, Florida, and all of that. Still, you know, they've even designated that as the Gullah Geechee corridor and so forth. There are many Gullah Geechee festivals, and sometimes they will include other ethnic groups as part of that Gullah Geechee constellation. For example, the Ovambo people who are related, they'll include them as that, and they'll say, I'm Gullah in general, but specifically the Gullah is the Gola people. The Kisi became the Kitsi or Geechee or Geechee people and so forth. But sometimes in the entire constellation, since people mixed and so forth, like the Ovambo people from Namibia and Angola, they will be part of the Gullah constellation as well. But they know specifically that they are, you know, specifically Ovambo, but they're part of that. And this also ties into the whole genealogical piece. So let me pull this out. And we're going to do something on this as well. But this is the last thing that we'll put up. All right, so Africanisms in the Gullah dialect. Now, this was written like in the 1940s, Lorenzo Dow Turner. So, and you can, get the book. You can actually you can download it on archive.org for free and so forth, because they're trying to sell it for a high price here on, Amazon, but you can get it for free on archive.org. But he went into the Gullah regions, and they would, when you hear people speaking the Gullah dialect or the Geechee dialect, and they say, oh, they're a saltwater Geechee and so forth, and they quote unquote talk funny. No, they have an accent. They have an Afro-Akani accent. And this is one thing they want to try to keep us away from who we actually are. When people from Jamaica speak quote unquote patois and so forth, they say, well, they're speaking English, but with their African accent. But when we speak with an Afro-Akani accent, they'll just say, oh, well, they're just ignorant, so they don't know how to speak English. But they did the whole notion of Ebonics, and they examined the way we structure sentences and so forth, and the way we pronounce words. What we're doing in North America is we're speaking English with the specific West Afro-Akani dialect. And that's the way West Afro-Akani people speak. So we arrange words in a certain pattern, and we pronounce words in a certain way because we're speaking with an accent. They didn't want us to understand that we were speaking with an accent, because it proves that we are Afro-Akani people. We're not just quote unquote Americans. And they wanted us to subvert our identity, so we can just say we don't know who we are. We're just Black people, and we don't have a culture, so we just need to embrace white American culture and be slaves mentally. They don't want you to know who you are, because that ties you back to power, economic and even military. So, but this book, he went into the Gullah regions and found hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of words from various Afro-Akani languages, and he lays them out, even the Akan terms for the names of the days of the week and the deities that they are, the names represent and so forth. But he groups the different words in the different languages and so forth, and shows that these people maintained in the Gullah dialect various Afro-Akani languages, the specific words. They have the same meanings in the Gullah and Geechee dialect as they do on the continent today. So we maintain much of the language, and we would speak the language in the, English, but we include these Afro-Akani words, as well as the patterns that we speak with the nouns and verbs and subjects and predicates and the way we move those things around. We're speaking English in an Afro-Akani dialect. So, and that's part of that genealogical research. When you look at how do our people speak, what is that Ebonic language or Gullah dialect, or people in, Louisiana, their specific dialect, or people in Mississippi or Alabama and so forth. There are different speech patterns that people have, and that leads to, oh, these people were stolen from this ethnic group, and they've maintained these terms and the speech patterns and so forth. So, okay. So if you're a Yoruba, how would you know who crowns your Ori? Some Yoruba say Obatala govern Sundays and some Thursdays. That's because they're trying to mix up the Akan approach, the 7-day week, with another culture. The Akan made an agreement with the Akradim Bosom that they would be sent into the world within a 7-day cycle to indicate to the community that this is the divinity that governs them. The Yoruba people made an agreement with the Orisha in a different way. They have a 5-day inclusive week, but they don't use day names. They have a different manner in which they determine who governs the Ori. So they have divinatory practices, and what they do is, like on the 8th day after the child is born, they do divination with Ifa. That's one of the ways they do it, to determine what Orisha governs the head. So, and many groups do that. They have a form of Adebisa divination to determine what deity governs this child. But you can't mix, two systems in the sense of the 7-day week in Akan culture and the deities governing that. That's a totally different system than the Yoruba have. Okay. Okay, so you think spiritually you might be part of the voodoo tradition on my dad's side from Louisiana. Also really related to Kemet. So we did an article in one of the books showing the relationship. Let me show this real quick. We showed this in a recent live, but we'll show it again. The first journal that we produced in our Etchy Sign conference. And then we'll be done. Just to show that connection. This is one of the things that we have published, and this is part of the work we do. So when we talk about, we have 31 books, and you can download the ebook versions for free, and we just released our 600-page volume, Odwirafo, that you can order directly from the website. This is the kind of research that we do. But this particular article that I wrote, Note on Hoodoo, Juju, Grigri, Vodun, Wangan, and Gengai, and we showed that these terms that preserved in North America that come from West and Central Africa, from these different languages, can be found in the language of ancient Kemet. So we talked about the other night how Vodun, well, for example, the Bambara people have Grigri, like Grigri bags and so forth. And we showed that that term, Gere, or Grigri in ancient Kemet, has the same meaning in Kemet as it does amongst the people in Mali, the Bambara. In Vodun, we talk about this divinity. Vodun means to rest and draw water and so forth. So this whole cosmology of the sacred divine hair going into the water, that's the wavy water line, and coming out at the beginning of creation and so forth. And that's not Unun, that's Wonun, but the U is also a V in certain dialects. So that instead of Wonun, it's Vonun, and that's the term Vodun and so forth. And you have the male and female divinity, Wonu or Wonu divinity. You'll even have in the Ewe people who make up the, Vodun people, the Fon people, and the Ewe people. Some pronounce it Ewe with a V, some pronounce it Ewe with a W, the V and W interchange. The Ovambo people, some will call themselves Ovambo with a V, some will say Owambo with a W, so that Wa and Va and U is the same term and so forth. So Wonu is also Vonun. That's the origin of the term Vodun. So the Ewe people, Igbo people, Akan people, Fang people, Yoruba people, Igbo people, they come from the Hapi Valley, Khanid and Kemet, Nubian Egypt, thousands of years ago, and spread out. That's why our languages are similar, and you'll see that we have the same divinities and so forth. Okay, so you can get that Africanisms of the Gullah dialect. Just Google that, and you can see it in archive.org. You can download it for free. But that's central as well to that notion of genealogical research that corroborates the genetic information, that corroborates the other anthropological information, that corroborates the ritual practice. All of them corroborate one another. So we can always, every Black person not only can find out who they are, but that's our responsibility, just as adults, to find out who you are, what your clan is. And there are clues that they've been giving us all along. Sometimes we're receptive enough. A mother will call her child, Lakisha or Takisha or something like that. And people will try to say that's a ghetto name, but it turns out these are Afrikani names. Like Michelle and William and so forth are not our names, but when they have Daquan or Tanisha and so forth, these are names you can find in ancient Khanid and Kemet in the hieroglyphic dictionary, in the Medut and Toro and so forth. So some of us instinctively maintained it, but then when we research, we will find out that we were engaged in these ritual practices and being moved by our Odumafo to do certain things, and then it's placed into context when we study. When it comes to divination and ritual practice and going to the ancestral shrine and so forth to engage the ritual practices to do these things, that's what our books deal with, and that's what our courses deal with. Now, the book we talked about recently that we just released recently, the 600-page book, Odwirafo, True Historical Anthology. You can order that book now from our website. It is on Amazon, but it costs more on Amazon because they charge 60+%. They take 60% off the top for all booksellers. So you can order directly from our website, the home page on our website. I'll put that in the chat room. And the whole notion of Africa, the origin of the term Africa, Kukutuntum, talking about the fictional characters of the Bible, Quran, Talmud, and so forth, the fictional character Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, Allah, Yahweh, Buddha, Brahman, and so forth, Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Solomon, Sheba, Menelik, David, all these fictional characters we go into. The Rekit Henasperet book about the origin of religion and spirit, the Kokobo book talking about the divine prohibition against dissexuality, homosexuality, the More Means Dead book. So you'll see the 12 books that comprise this anthology. We have them on the back cover of the book. So that's that. This Tuesday is our final 4-week course. If you would like to register, we have a few spaces left open for that. And let me show you that right quick. The SUSUW course. SUSUW Meditation Instructor Certification course. So if you would like to be certified to conduct meditation sessions in places of business or schools or human services organizations, a number of different applications for that. And you can generate income for yourself. We have a 4-week online course. You become certified and you have your certification after the 4 weeks, and you can go to different places and they pay you like $100, $200 to come out and conduct a 10, 15, 20-minute meditation session for employees, for youth in schools, for people at human services organizations, cultural organizations, Black-owned businesses like Black bookstores or health food stores or whatever it is. And people do it part-time or full-time, but we're certifying the final group. It starts Tuesday. So we have a few spaces left open for that. This is the link for that. Put that in the chat room. The SUSUW page on the website. So we only have a few spots left open. So that starts in 2 days. So you can register for that now. And then the final piece is, of course, we have our bachelor's degree of arts and philosophy. And also the same thing, once you obtain that, you can utilize that as an education entrepreneur, which is the terminology is edupreneur. And when you look on our page, you will see that we have, we talked a lot about this in the live from last night, so you can also check out the details that we went into last night about that. but it is the NIMDEESEM Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy. You can do it in a 42-week program. We have 42 online courses that comprise our degree program. You can do it in a 42-week format or the minimum 21-week format. All of our 42 online courses you study. It's a self-paced study. You go through a course, the modules and so forth, and then we have a live Zoom private where we test you on that particular course. And once you pass that, you go to the next course and so forth. So just like any university that has a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy degree program, and it's comprised of 40 courses, we have 42 courses that comprise ours. And we did a lot of detail about that in the live from last night. So you can check that out. We talk about that in detail here. And we also give you talk about the notion of the edupreneur, but also the various paid opportunities available with the Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy degree. We talk about group therapy sessions like at behavioral health organizations. It could be Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, and so forth. Group therapy sessions, and they'll have you come and sit with the group. The therapist will say, I'm going to bring someone out Friday to sit with us and do a short meditation session and to help us get refocused and disciplined. Women in shelters, family shelters, similar things. Employer events, like they have money set aside in the budget to have a MLK holiday commemoration to have someone speak. Black History Month events, Memorial Day events, Juneteenth events, Black August events, Kwanzaa events, and more. All they need is someone with a certificate, a certification. They have the money set aside. They're going to bring somebody out. And you say, listen, I have a degree, a Bachelor of Arts degree in philosophy rooted in African history and culture and spirituality. They're like, perfect, you can come out, you have your degree, they'll cut the check and so forth. So some people just move in that arena. They go to different businesses that have funds set aside every month for speakers to present, and they get paid $300 or $400 for a half an hour session or something like that. Some people prefer, however, to work in schools, after school programs, weekend programs for youth, summer programs for youth, and they go and do presentations, around what youth can study about our history and culture and history and, a number of different things, holistic health and everything else. Hold on a second. Let me see, did the screen go out? Okay. And some people prefer to do the work within Black businesses alone. So African-centered bookstores, businesses like health food stores, organizations, conferences, cultural events, spiritual events, study groups. So when they know you have this body of information, they'll say, hey, we're having an event at our bookstore on Friday where people come up and do presentations. Can you do a 20-minute presentation on the origin of the term Africa from ancient Ghanaian Kemet, or the origin of the fictional character Jesus from ancient Kemet, or the origin of the fictional character Muhammad, or many of the things that they want to learn, or conduct a session on a SUSUW meditation session. So once they know you have a degree, they'll pay you to come out, or some study groups will pay you, hey, I want you to come out and speak on this. Some groups will fly you out to their Black-owned business in California. They have a Black bookstore and so forth. They want someone to speak on specific topics that you have expertise in because you have your degree. Paid events. And you can host your own events as well. So we show you how to do that, how to conduct these things. And we have a new payment plan option. So as you can see, the degree program is $600 total. The books are free downloads, all 30 one books. But we have the option where you can pay $199 down and then pay $199 per month, or $149 down and pay $149 per month until it's paid off, or $99 down and $99 per month until it's paid off. And then what you will find is, when you book your first session, say you book a session at a school or a corporation or a Black-owned bookstore or something like that, and they pay you a couple $100, that's, the first month of your down payment. And if they have you come out a couple of times, or once a month, or once every other week or something, within a few weeks, you will have paid off your entire tuition just from, these events. Some people will do a school on Monday, an after school program on Tuesday, a business on Wednesday, a cultural organization on Friday. And they basically work 1 hour per day conducting a meditation session or, presentations on philosophy and culture and so forth, and generate $200 a day or something like that, maybe $800 a week, just by working an hour a day. So, and we've already certified like 44 people in the meditation instructor certification course since last year. So people are out there now conducting these sessions and making money for themselves as entrepreneurs as we speak. So our focus is to not just give people the opportunity to have a degree and to sound intelligent or sound quote unquote deep, but our focus is to give you that and give you the tools while you're earning that to generate income. When you're taking the degree program, whether it's 21 weeks or 41 weeks, the first 2 weeks, you will receive your meditation instructor certification certificate. So after the first 2 weeks, you can go out and start conducting meditation sessions and get paid while you are still studying the remainder of the philosophy degree. So you can start generating money right away. We're not going to make you wait until 42 weeks is over or 21 weeks is over before you get your certificate and you can start generating money. You can do that within the first 2 weeks. So that's up there. And the last thing we'll put out is what we said at the very beginning of the broadcast. Our fundraiser event, the fundraiser or crowdfund effort, we're working, as we said, to complete our Hoodoo film by October 18th so we can release it at the Hoodoo Mind, Hoodoo Nation Festival. So, hold on a second. So this is the fundraiser page. If you can contribute, please do so. We're trying to raise the first third of these funds this month, the second third next month. So your contribution is going to help us to complete the filming and get the film ready for this October. And you will be able to participate in the free screening of the film because of your contribution, whether you come in person to the Hoodoo Mind Festival or if you get the private link and you can watch from wherever you are in the country or in the world and so forth. So we appreciate your support on that. Yet I'll say we thank you to those who contributed yesterday as well to the effort. And you'll see that on the page and all the details on the page. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and end it here. You said, oh, you meant to ask what book has divination prayers in it. We can send you one of the books, actually, by the sister Kajara, Nia Yanabehed Rakit Kajara. She has a prayer book as well. And then there are books specifically, for example, in the language of ancient Khanini Kemet, some of the texts that are translated. So I can post those. In fact, I'll send an email and I'll find some of that and I'll send it out. All right. Okay, so if there are no other questions. I want to make sure I didn't miss any of them. Okay, I think I got everything. Okay, so Yedase, we thank everybody for tuning in. And Yebeshiabio, we will meet again. That's it.
SUSUW, Meditation Instructor Certification. SUSUW is the ancient Akan term for meditation. SUSUW originated in our ancestral culture of Afurakaet, Africa, tens of thousands of years ago. This ancient practice has been utilized to regulate physical, emotional, and mental balance for millennia in varied expressions wherever our people have migrated in the world. The scientific benefits of meditation for youth and adults have been well documented, enhancing learning outcomes, regulating behavior, overcoming anxiety and depression, rebalancing hormones, lowering blood pressure, reducing stress, regulating weight loss, overcoming addictions, developing discipline, maintaining focus to overcome obstacles to short and long-term goals. Our meditation instructor certification is for individuals, independent contractors, educators, homeschoolers, human services professionals, behavioral health professionals, and others. As a certified instructor, you are qualified to contract with independent schools, charter schools, cultural organizations, corporate entities, women's and family shelters, community centers, colleges, and more to conduct meditation sessions on a daily, weekly, or periodic basis. Our instruction is rooted in our Nkwamwa whole life wellness model.
Chimo, that means greetings. I just wanted to give a quick update. You'll get the details in the clip that follows. I just wanted to show everyone. So my soft cover book, Odwirafo True Historical Anthology, is now available. It's live on Amazon, but we also have a 30% discount when you order directly through our website. As we said before, in some of the postings and information we sent out, you know, Amazon takes 60% off the top for booksellers on their distribution site and so forth. So we can offer it at a 30% discount, you know, on our website. So you'll get the information in the clip that follows, but 8.5 by 11 size, 600 pages, full color. And we go into detail about various aspects of African Ancestral Religion, culture, nation building, true historical information, spirituality, cosmology, and every facet of Afurakani, Afurakani, African Black identity, and so forth. So check out the clip that follows. We look forward to connecting with you. And Yerase, we thank you for your support. Odwirafo, True Historical Anthology. This is a collection of 12 books in one volume written by Odwirafo Kwesi Radnehmpata Akan. This 600-page anthology is comprised of 12 books within the 31-book corpus published by Odwirafo, which focus on trustery, cosmology, ritual, identity, and nation-building restoration for Afurakani, Afurite Kaitnit people, African Black people, wherever we exist in the world. Included within this anthology is the origin of the fictional characters Jesus, Allah, Yahweh, Buddha, and more. The etymology of the term God in the language of ancient Kemet, quote-unquote Egypt. Origin of the term Afuraka, Afurite Kayet, Africa in Kemet. Etymology and cosmology of religion and spirit in Kemet. Ankh and Kara, the origin of the terms yoga and chakra in Kemet. Afurakani, Afurite Kaitnit, African Black origin of civilization. Divine order in Afurakani, Afurite Kaitnit, African cosmology. Ritual in Afurakani, Afurite Kaitnit, African ancestral religion. Nature of the soul as divine consciousness in Akan cosmology. More means dead. Male-female complementary balance in ancestral religion. Ancestresses, ancestors, goddesses, gods, biology, geology. Racial exclusivity in ancestral religion. Spirigenetic inheritance. Divine prohibition against dissexuality, homosexuality in Kemet. Black nation building, restoration, rooted in ancestral religion, and more. This anthology was curated to function as a volume that will positively transform the mind of any Afurakani, Afurite Kaitnit, African Black individual, youth, or adult who receives it. We examine every facet of Afurakani, Afurite Kaitnit, African identity, empowering readers to transform their minds and thus transform their condition wherever they exist in the world. Special 30% discount for our subscribers and followers. See our website to order now. Yerase.